Sally Field. You won't believe what happened next. Imagine sitting across from some of the most magnetic men in Hollywood history. Men who didn't just make Sally Field's pulse race, but made her want to throw the whole script out the window. At 78, she still remembers them all. Not just crushes or fleeting fantasies, but men whose presence alone could unravel her, whose voices haunted the quiet moments, whose touch she secretly longed for. 7 men, 7 stories, and every one of them unforgettable. James Garner, the smooth cowboy with a grin that could melt steel. Working together on Murphy's Romance, James wasn't just a co-star. He was the kind of man who made you forget you were on camera. His charm wasn't loud or flashy, it was that slow, steady burn beneath the surface. A gentle touch at the small of her back, a casual brush of his shoulder, and suddenly, the whole set felt electric. Crew members whispered about their chemistry, but Sally swears what happened off-camera was even more intense. She joked years later that working with him should come with a warning label. Handle with caution, liable to cause daydreams. Once, during a rehearsal, his arm slipped around her shoulder, and she had to remind herself to focus on the scene. But in her head, she was already imagining dragging him straight off set and locking the trailer door. If James had asked her then, she says with a grin, she would have said yes without a second thought. Then there's Burt Reynolds, the wild card, with a mustache and a laugh that could shake the room. On Smokey and the Bandit, sparks flew naturally, not just scripted. Burt had this effortless way of leaning into their chemistry, making every moment feel like a game you didn't want to end. He'd wink between takes, grin like he knew exactly what was running through her mind. Sally remembers thinking if he laughed like that in bed, she'd never survive the night. It wasn't just charm, it was the way he carried himself, like a man who knew what he wanted but let you come to him. And Sally? She would have gone willingly. If Burt had whispered just once, "Come with me," she says, she would have been out the door before he finished the sentence. That fire they shared wasn't just for the cameras, it was real, dangerous, and intoxicating. Paul Newman, those piercing blue eyes, and that quiet, steady presence that made the chaos of the world seem to pause. Working with Paul wasn't acting. It was surrender. Sally says that just sitting across from him felt like falling into a different kind of gravity. If he had whispered her name, she would have followed him anywhere. Newman didn't need to say much. His silence spoke volumes. The power wasn't arrogance, it was restraint, the kind that made your imagination run wild. His voice was low and playful, turning even the simplest question into something deeply intimate. "How's your lunch?" could make you blush for reasons you didn't understand. Between takes, when the cameras stopped rolling, she says her heart was pounding so loud she thought the crew might hear. Paul Newman wasn't just a man on screen, he was a dream come to life. Then comes Robin Williams, a whirlwind of energy and emotion. On Mrs. Everdeleven, Doubtfire, Robin's genius was his joy. But beneath that lightning-fast humor was a soul that ran deep. He could switch from manic improv to heartbreaking sincerity in an instant. Sally says working with him was like trying to hold lightning in her hands, thrilling, chaotic, and completely unpredictable. One minute you wanted to throttle him, and the next you wanted to kiss him just to quiet him down. He wasn't just alive, he was electric, and that kind of vitality was impossible to resist. But the real magic, she says, was in his silence. The rare moments when the noise faded and you caught a glimpse of the man beneath the laughter. That quiet could undo you. Sally admits she wanted to pull him out of the studio and see where the night might lead. Robin wasn't just a comedian, he was a force of nature, too big to be confined by a script. Clint Eastwood, the quiet storm. Sally never acted alongside Clint, but that didn't stop her from feeling his presence like a gravitational pull. He walked into a room and didn't have to say a word. The air simply shifted. Clint's power wasn't in grand gestures but in the space between words, the silence that hung heavy and dangerous. Sally watched him from afar at Hollywood events and found herself imagining what it would be like to be the one who stepped into his orbit. It wasn't about romance, it was about surrender. The hat tipped low, the cigarette dangling, the pause before the storm. Clint didn't need lines. Just a look or a raised eyebrow could undo her. Some men are dangerous because they talk too much. Clint was dangerous because he didn't have to say a thing. Then there's Dustin Hoffman, intense, obsessive, impossible to ignore. He threw himself into every role like chasing a ghost only he could see. And that single-mindedness made him fascinating and frustrating all at once. Sally laughs, remembering how working with Dustin felt like standing too close to a fire. He poked, prodded, and never settled for the easy answer. He had this way of listening that was almost consuming, making you feel exposed, like your deepest secrets were about to spill out. Sally confesses she thought if Dustin ever looked at her like that off set, she wouldn't stand a chance. She'd spill everything and might even like it. His unpredictability was its own kind of seduction, flipping from fury to tenderness in seconds. He made you want to fight back and give in at the same time. With Dustin, there were no clear lines, only that thrilling edge of crossing boundaries and wondering what would happen next. And finally, Gregory Peck, the embodiment of dignity and grace. He wasn't just handsome, he carried himself with a kind of quiet authority that made morality itself seem seductive. Sally says, just imagining him is enough to make you sit up straighter. His voice turned simple words into promises, and his presence demanded respect. There was nothing flashy about Gregory Peck. That was his power. You didn't chase him, you gave yourself willingly. He was the kind of man you dreamed of walking toward, eyes wide open, knowing exactly what you were surrendering and wanting it anyway. Whenever she watches To Kill a Mockingbird, Sally leans toward the screen, caught between reverence and something more dangerous. It wasn't just Atticus Finch on the screen, it was Gregory. That steady jawline, that calm strength, that voice. If you didn't have to imagine desire, it lived in every inch of him. So, what's the secret? These men weren't just stars on the screen. They were forces of nature who made Sally Field, America's sweetheart, want to throw away the script and live in those moments forever. They were charmers, rebels, quiet legends, and wild spirits, all different, all unforgettable. And the truth? She loved every second of it. If you enjoyed this trip through Hollywood's most intoxicating moments, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that take you behind the scenes and beyond the spotlight. Because sometimes, the real magic happens off-camera. What about you? Who's the one that makes your pulse race? Let me know in the comments.